Welcome to Evolutionary Hardcore 2.0, episode 95 coming your way. We're going to talk about quality gear, testosterone, Ultima Pharma. So we're going to focus this one around testosterone. Mobster and I, we're going to talk about testosterone 101. We're going to talk about bad testosterone to watch out for. We're going to talk about ultimate options for testosterone, all the different types of testosterone they have to offer, including the blends and how to use them and all that good stuff. And we're going to talk about why Ultima is so good. But first, let's talk a little bit about testosterone 101. And look, I can go back. We can go back to the first time
Yeah.
they extracted synthetic testosterone. So they experimented with testicular extract, but true synthetic testosterone intended for human use was first made its way in 1935. That was a long time ago. That was before your time, Mob. So that's how long ago it was.
Before my
And
mum's time.
yeah. And look, the chemists that were able to accomplish this both received Nobel Prize for their work. So
Yeah.
the testosterone hormone now being isolated and synthesized, the first successful injections of testosterone were available in the form testosterone propionate. So they were able to actually add the ester, propionate ester, very short ester, and a lot of professional bodybuilders will use propionate because of its flexibility. We're going to talk about that in that show. So once the first batches of testosterone were made available, many other forms were introduced and made ready for human use. And look, all testosterone in general sense, same stuff. It's the ester attached that gives it its own unique function, and they attach the esters for time release and duration of activity. But all in all exogenous testosterone is testosterone. So we've seen the cliche: test is test, test is
Yes.
test. So they're all
Yes.
testosterone. It's just they release differently. It's like when you go to the drugstore and you buy the Mucinex. You get the 12-hour release Mucinex. You get the 24-hour Mucinex. What's the difference? The 12-hour is going to hit your system a little quicker, and it's going to be out of your system quicker. The 24-hour is more extended release, so it's going to slowly release. So if you go to a drugstore and your sinuses are clogged and you've got this phlegm and you're like, I need to get rid of this as soon as possible, you have the 12-hour one. It's going to give you relief in the next 30, 45 minutes. You'll start feeling relief. The 24-hour one, it's going to take an hour or two till you start feeling relief, but it's going to last longer. So you don't have to take another dose before bed. So the same thing with testosterone. They added these esters to make them release slower, to make some last longer. Now, what are the advantages of that? We're going to kind of get into that later in the podcast. It's going to boil down to how long your cycle is going to be,
Yeah.
what you're trying to accomplish. Are you competing? Obviously, if you're a competitor, you probably want more flexibility, and you want it to be able to start and stop it more differently. If you want to use testosterone more for long-term TRT, which is kind of the complete opposite of that, then obviously you want something that's more slow releasing so that you don't have to inject it as often. So Ultima has different options that they have available. And it's pretty cool that the different options they have all have different different reasons for using, and some people have different preferences when it comes
Yes.
to that. So let me go over some of the benefits of exogenous testosterone, and then I'll let Mobster come in here and give you your thoughts. So one of the things that you get right off the bat is, especially if you have lower testosterone levels, you're going to notice bigger differences. So if you're a guy and you've got low testosterone and you go on testosterone, you're going to notice a big change with everything across the board, when it comes to whatever's causing whatever side effects you're getting from the low testosterone, like libido, for example.
Mm.
People who have had low testosterone and they get on testosterone, they notice right away within the first couple of weeks, they're like, wow, my libido, I feel like I'm 17 again,
Yeah.
and that's a big difference because you're getting the exogenous testosterone that you weren't getting naturally, that your body was producing. Another thing you might notice is going to be easier for you to put on mass. It's going to be easier for you to put on strength. It's going to boost your appetite. It's going to boost your mood. It's going to boost your confidence. It's going to help better make your proteins, increase protein synthesis. You're going to be able to better partition the food that you're eating. So the food you eat becomes even more valuable. You're going to do things like increase your blood cell count. So that's going to give you more endurance, more energy, you know? Obviously if you do it too much, it can give you a stroke, you know, because it's going to make your blood too thick. So obviously anything that you abuse can also be a negative. So if you abuse testosterone way too much, what can happen? You could start getting negative side effects. On the flip side, you open yourself up for gynecomastia, which are bitch tits. You open yourself up for high blood pressure, stroke, bad cholesterol. You open yourself up for prostate strain. You open yourself up for water retention. And then all the side effects that come with water retention, including insomnia. And you know, there's all kinds of things that can happen. So, you know, on the flip side, you know, we want to make sure with testosterone that we're running it to best benefit us. We're not just running as much as we can. We've seen guys in the past who have run a ton of testosterone just to play around with it, and they've ended up actually hurting themselves. And in some cases, they've, you know, caused big problems where they had to go spend $12,000 to have their gland removed in their breasts because they ended up with gyno. And that's not what we want. So we want to make sure we run it the right way. So we're going to talk about that on the podcast. But you know, I'm ranting a little too much. Bringing you in, Mobster. Talk about testosterone
Let
101.
me just expand on the TRT sensation thing, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what could arguably, Steve, make for bad testosterone, because we're going to hold that up as a light to compare against what we talk about as good testosterone. So in terms of the actual effects, something I've described in previous shows is what I call low T guys going on TRT. And the transformation isn't just in the physical, as all the things that Steve said happen. There was one I want to expand on, which is what Steve mentioned, which is the sense of well-being. So what you will occasionally hear, and this is from TRT sites and forums, never mind the forums that we deal with, and that is this sense of well-being. It gets into things like confidence. Start away, the libido's, you know, going up is going to make you feel more confident. You literally feel sexier, okay? But there's things like literally a more positive mental outlook. I've used the analogy of politicians and salesmen and leaders of industry, business owners, etc., going on CRT and being transformed. If you're going to go out as a politician and stand in front of a crowd, let's say it's 1,000 people, and you want them to vote for you, you want to come across in a confident, I know what's going on and I'm going to fucking fix things kind of way. Low testosterone, you're probably not going to be able to sell yourself quite that well. If you're a sales rep or even someone that runs a sales team, you want your sales team to perform incredibly well, to go out and sell more cars and more houses and more air conditioning machinery and whatever that you're selling, more Xerox machines, whatever the fuck it is, and break records and beat the other team and so on and so forth. And obviously this applies into the jocks, but specifically you're a leader of men. You're out there, you're kicking ass, and your team's doing incredibly well. So you will quite often see this thing where people that aren't on CRT go on CRT and they transform mentally, physically, and in any number of ways. And that's just on the TRT side. Obviously, we know using many kinds of testosterone how much we can improve in the gym, whether that's being that little bit leaner, that little bit stronger, that little bit more muscular, whether it's, for example, in my case, breaking more records, and so on and so forth. You know, I mean, the transformation, the difference it can make. I've kind of argued against it in the past, saying that my grip strength when I was competing in grip competitions didn't improve per se when I was using it, but my ability to recover from the training did. In other words, I could train more, I could train harder, I could recover better, and therefore those things increased my grip strength. I didn't just take testosterone and suddenly my hands got stronger. That wasn't exactly how it wanted. I just had to put the training in, still do the work, but I was able to and more capable of recovering from those things and therefore improving, and therefore being stronger, traveling halfway across the world to compete, and so on and so forth. And I'm just an example. You could many kind of athletes from college football upwards, Steve. So that's just on the sports side. And we know that, ironically, the history stuff, Steve, includes, as we know, because we actually did a show particularly on this. When we talked to the golden age and the silver age of bodybuilding, we know that they were interested in using steroids in their 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. Steve said when the steroids become available, that was just for medical use. But adverts, we've literally included, I believe, one of the graphics for one of our shows was an advert from a 1937. I think it was Popular Mechanics, Steve, and it was an advert for some sort of methyl testosterone with the idea that the readers of that magazine would buy it and feel more manly. So we know that these things are out there. I want to move in a tangent now to talk about what makes for bad testosterone. Well, arguably, you could go the testosterone that you use that doesn't work for you. And I've discussed on previous shows that for whatever reason, I never seem to get much out of enanthate. I've tried halo testing, which is not a straight testosterone, but just as an example. And for whatever reason, I didn't get that level of aggression that other users had, and so on. So there are certain PEDs, and specifically testosterone, that Steve will get on with better than I will, and vice versa. So I believe you could, for our use, for what we want from training, that would not be a good choice. So arguably, we could throw that in the bad testosterone camp. But of course, there are many, many users that have had great results using testing enanthate versus myself. And so for them, it would be a plus. But let's talk about bad kinds of testosterone. So the reason why we recommend companies exactly like Ultima and the sellers of Ultima products is because we want good sources providing good quality product that we know is going to work for the listeners of this show and give them great results. Now, I want to hold that up against the light of what bad testosterone used to be. So historically, we've talked about the brief history of the iron game and how testosterone reared its ugly head all the way back in the 1930s when it was available, even Popular Mechanic magazines, etc. What did we see 70s and 80s, Steve? In the 70s, very limited supply. Didn't always, really wasn't getting hold of what we call the various testosterone esters. And we've discussed the reasons why we thought Arnold and others used certain kind of steroids back in the day. I've even said that the rumors had it that they were able to be referred to a doctor, quote unquote, down the street from Gold's Gym where they could go and he would prescribe them the available forms of steroids that were available at that time, monitor them. He may not have been getting the blood test that we would recommend today, but certainly make sure that other health markers were being looked at, blood pressure and so on and so forth, any issues that they were having in the gym. And so on and so forth. From that particular point, we talked about the kind of steroids that some users in those times was getting was literally in a bag in the trunk of a buddy's car at the back of the gym, in the car park at the back of the gym. They go out and look, and he would say, "This is what's available. Do you want to buy it?" We talked about York barbell guys using Debo. Round that time, we started to see what we call now underground labs, and magazines of that time, 1980s, had reports on Mexican labs, Indian labs. We started to see product coming in from China. So what have we seen over the years? We've seen heavy metals appear in some of the earlier Chinese product 15, 20 years ago, because due to poor manufacturing processes. We've seen literal videos. You can still find examples of these. I've referred to a couple on YouTube and on documentaries where Lad Bible, just in the last couple of years, Steve, did a 30-minute mini documentary where there was a steroid dealer up north in this country making steroids with a balaclava on in his kitchen. It wasn't even polythene or health and safety. He was just making the steroids in front of the reporter. I've talked about on another documentary, Dave Crossland sitting in a lockup, a garage, a 1 or 2 car garage, and they are making steroids and they're using a microwave on the table in front of Dave after they poured the powder into the oil solution, and they mix it in front of him in a beaker using a glass stirrer, and then they put it in the microwave. So the quality control is horrendous. We've seen examples, again, 1980s onwards, where we used to go on certain early bodybuilding and weightlifting forums, Steve, as you know, and we would see really bad looking quality product that was crashing all the time, product that had fly fucking wings in it, product where the rubber bung was really low quality, the labels were horrendous. I said more recently, I used an example where someone had asked about a particular source and they provided a photograph that had been taken from the website, and I went and checked the website, and on the fucking website, Steve, the product that the company that was selling this product, this vial of steroids, the best photograph they'd managed to find, the best photograph of their product they'd decided to use, the fucking label was wonky. It didn't, they were too fucking lazy to make sure that the label's on straight, then take a photograph and present that as a product that you want to buy. And if you're looking at that and you go, what's the big deal about the label, Mobster? Well, motherfuckers, if the label's wonky, what the fuck's in the product? What's their quality control like? When we talk about these shows, Steve, and we're going to emphasize this again when we talk about Ultima towards the end of the show, we talk about quality control, we talk about innovation, we talk about specifically lab tests. Okay. So one of the things that we used to see just 10, 15 years ago, Steve, was far more frequent then than it is now, because quality across the board has gone up. Competition in the marketplace has gone up. And what do I mean by that? So, for example, we've seen the pro-hormone debacle where people were posting jaundice eyes. We used to see occasionally, not a lot, thank Christ, even then, people where they'd had abscesses on their glutes, or when they'd had to go to ER or A&E, as we call it in this country, and have the thing drained. Or worse, we would see photographs of people where they'd had the abscess removed, and you would literally see the post-surgery photograph. In other words, the flesh, literal lump of flesh that's been taken away, or you'd see the scar tissue afterwards from the individual's operation. So when was the last time you and I saw something like that, Steve? I'm going to say, bearing in mind how long you and I have been doing these shows and how long I've been on the Evo family of forums, I can't remember since I've been working with you, and certainly for probably a few years before then, so let's say 10 years, the 10 years that we've seen a single example on a regular basis, it used to be quite a common thing, of abscesses that have needed to be removed as a result of poor quality products. 10 years. I think I've seen one where it was a post-injection and they had like a scab or something where they'd injected in a bad needle and they literally had like a sort of, it was half the size of a penny, black dot on their arm where they'd been injected into their arm. Not probably the best place to inject, nevertheless. It was the last time I saw something like that, and literally one of those in the last 10 years. So we don't see crash product as often as we used to. We don't see the abscesses, thank fuck, and we haven't seen those for a long time. Quality companies like Ultima, and again, I'll expand on this later in the show, have become what I would like to call pharma grade. In other words, they have started to operate, and one or two of them actually are, we've discussed this on other shows, pharmaceutical companies. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about the big, massive, big pharma type operations producing those kind of medications that you're incredibly familiar with, and exactly the kind of medications that you see in hospitals and used by the doctors and so on and so forth. And they might argue against that. They might say, oh, we've gone off and done lab tests on certain products. But yeah, the companies that make it, the companies that last, are producing, like Ultimate, quality products. It's literally boxed like a pharma company's product. It's produced to that standard. The companies themselves are putting pressure on themselves, and of course, this affects the whole of the industry, to do lab tests. Lab tests has almost become a given, Steve, in that particular regards. The way that the product looks is comparable to a product that you would go to a pharmacy for. So that is the difference between what used to be, quote unquote, bad testosterone, and you should hold any company now, including companies like Ultima, up against that, and they shine because of that. What do you think about the stuff that we've seen in the past versus what we see now from companies like Ultima, the good product?
Yeah, and look, back when I first started using these steroids, I dealt with a lot of bad testosterone. And look, it sucks, it sucks because you're busting your ass, you're spending all this money on supplements, on food, going to the gym, spending time in the gym, really working hard. And halfway through your cycle, you realize, something's wrong. So then you go get blood work done. And this is the ironclad way to test to see if your testosterone is legit. You go get blood work done, and you're like, man, I'm on 500 milligrams a week of testosterone, but my blood work is barely where a 70-year-old should be. So no wonder I'm not seeing results. So I'm getting shut down in the process, and it's so underdosed that I'm barely registering any testosterone in my system. So no wonder I'm actually not only are you getting bad results, or you're getting worse results than you would have just training naturally. So that shit chaps my ass right there. I hate that shit. So, and testosterone is these sources that are out there selling this fake testosterone, they're making a fortune on their margins in the process. So they're ripping you off, pocketing the money, and they don't give a shit. So one of the things you can do, obviously, is go get blood work done. But in the process, it shouldn't come to that, because you don't want to be injecting bad quality gear. Because as Mobster said, what happens if you end up with an infection or an abscess? You have to go to the emergency room, get it drained. You have to go to the emergency room and get antibiotics, spend thousands of dollars in medical bills that weren't necessary. And that's not right. So one of the things you have to do is always use quality gear. Today, there's no reason why you should experiment with gear from the guy with the white van in the back of the gym who whispers to you, "Hey, dude, come here. I got something I want to show you." Then he takes you to his white van. He opens it up, and he's got fucking gear in his van. He's like, "Oh man, I'll sell you this gear for $50." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Wow, this is a good deal. Huh? It's cheaper than what I can buy from an approved source. Let me just buy it for 40 or $50." Well, it's crap gear. And even if that gear, you get the blood work done and the gear seems okay, what happens, as Mobster said, it's got heavy metals. What happens if it's got allergens in it that can put you
Yeah.
in the hospital? Well, it doesn't make any sense. You want to make sure you stick to quality gear. That's why Ultima is so popular. Years and years and years, we've never once seen anyone complain about Ultima gear. Their gear is always on point. I've used their gear. I've used their testosterone. I know it's legit. So it's good quality gear, and it's fairly priced because they do produce it in bulk. So they're able to pass those savings on to you. So that's what you got to do. You got to make sure that the gear you're getting is good quality, not just that it's dosed properly, but also that it's good quality overall. So you
Clean.
don't have other problems. Very clean. Yeah.
Let me give you an example, Steve. And this is the kind of stuff we're seeing. Even when a product's been dosed properly, even when it's been produced hygienically. One company example some years ago, Steve, thank Christ it was some years ago, was using peanut oil. What the fuck? Why would you use peanut oil? Probably the most fucking allergic oil you could possibly use. Why do we see, for example, and we talked about this on recent shows, discussing multiple brands, including Ultima, we said, why are higher dosed products for years? Myself, 5 years ago, if you listen to some of these early shows, I said, I'm not a fan of 400, 450, 500 milligram products. Why do we see less issues with high dose products? Because everybody's using grapeseed oil. Everybody's using the right ratio of benzoyl alcohol. You don't get that post-injection pain that you used to with the higher dose products because companies like Ultima are producing solid products. Let me give you another example of bad versus good. I've been literally given twice in my life free Dynamo. And in one example, bless them, they were trying to help me, but it had fuck all in it, Steve. I've told this story before. Taking it, I think I had enough for 10 days, and I made a big mistake, which I always tell the listeners on and members on the forums, don't do this. I also always say get your cycle ready ahead of time. But a competition had come up. I thought I had enough, and I was wrong. So I had to place an order with my source at the time to get hold of enough product to run a cycle. And so I started the cycle at the time that I needed to start, as based on this product that had been given to me. And like Steve said, it was bunk. There was nothing in it. There was no active compound. If there was anything in it, it was incredibly low. So I've started my cycle, nothing, 10 days. 10 days in, that runs out. The new product, the actual legitimate product, turns up. And from the Friday through to the Monday, I put on 4 pounds on D-Bolt. This was, Steve, I think 30, 40 milligrams a day back in the day when I was using it. And literally the bunk product, nothing. I mean, 4 days, 4 pounds, pound a day using a legitimate product. So you don't want to waste your money. You don't want to be risking your health. You want, for example, Stephen, this is something that we used to see. We used to see product where testosterone's included. It wasn't that testosterone that you wanted. As I said earlier on, what would be the point? And as the regular listeners will know, I'm a huge fan of, for bulking up, Sustanon and Deca. I know that if I take Sustanon Deca at the right ratios, certain particular milligram dosages, I'm going to blow up like a motherfucker. I will put on weight. What if the product, when it gets here, isn't Sustanon or isn't Deca? We have seen this. What if I've got a competition and I'm a competing bodybuilder and I must be using shorter acting esters in the last few weeks running up to my actual day of competition? I don't want a company to be sending me a product that's labeled with a short-acting ester, and it's actually a longer-acting ester. So now I'm holding on to water, and now I'm holding on to tissue that I can't get. Why bolts up still 3 days from the competition? I should be looking leaner than this. I've got everything else is on point. My cardio, my diet, everything else is on point. Well, what the fuck? And then literally change esters and realize what the fuck's going on. Or someone's had the product tested somewhere else, and I see the product test come back, and I realize that I've been done. I'm out. I've got thousands of dollars invested in this competition, all my time and effort, 14, 15 weeks getting ready for a competition, and I've been turned over because the product wasn't what it should have been. We've seen this when Anavar was Devo and so on and so forth. So we need to have companies like Ultima producing product that is exactly what it said it is at the great dosages that it should be, with the zero or very, very little post-injection pain, as clean and hygienic as possible. And we're then putting out, for example, in the case, and we will discuss some of the options, where they've literally produced product that is exactly the way you're going to use it on cycle. It's the reason why they give you multiple options. They can give you straightforward options so that you can manipulate the variables yourself, or they've done blends, and we're really doing mostly today with the straightforward options, but also put blends together which are exactly mimicking the kind of cycles that you would put together, for example, using 2 different esters and so on and so forth, different kinds of testosterone in the same vial, so that they've done the work for you. And that's the way that companies need to be now. I like the fact, in a perverse kind of way, Steve, that it's that much more competitive, because it forces companies to be way better and on point. And one of the things I'll say before I let you come back in, Steve, is, well, and I say this all the time, and I certainly say this a lot frequently recently, Steve, which is that where listeners, new listeners and new users of PDs don't understand how bad it used to be and how good they've got it now. What do you think on that before we move on to options?
Yeah, and for sure. And like I said, there's no excuse in 2024 for sources to continue to rip us off. There's just too many ways for us to know if the gear is good or not. So if you're going to try to rip people off, you're going to get your ass called out, and we're going to have evidence of it. And we have the reputation, Mobster and I, when we say gear is no good, you listen. You better listen. If we say gear is good, you better listen, because our reputations are there. We have the
Ours in the
reputations of
forum, Steve, we had
uh,
one company that recently, a couple of years ago, I'm not going to name them on this show, where we dropped them in 4 days. Reports started to come in of this particular company not producing good product. We'd actually recommended them, we'd raved about them, we had users out there using their product, and their quality fell off the fucking roof, went through the floor, and was gone somewhere halfway down to Australia. And this happened very, very quickly. And we've been talking great noises about it for about 6 months, 7 months. And the moment the quality fell, the moment the product started to be bunked, the moment people started to complain about issues, they were gone. I think we were talking about them on the Friday and they were gone on the Monday. And they went on the Monday because we'd seen tests, we'd seen results, we'd seen people with issues. So that's disappointing for us. We don't like the idea that we go off and we look at a company, we see the lab tests, we talk to users, we've seen logs of people running their product and getting great results, and then that company rips you guys off. That company starts to lowball you. That company starts to underdose their product. That company starts to let quality control go out the window. Or even worse, Steve, that they are producing great product, but they don't send you the order. They take your money and fuck you off. It annoys us a lot because it's, again, like Steve said, it's based on our reputation. So when we do these shows, and I'm including Ultima here, we go and look at their products. We go and see product tests. We literally go and find people that are running the logs. If I'm linking to this podcast, I will go and see people's logs online. I will see literally that they've run their logs, that they've used their product, they're asking questions about Ultima. We will look at the product itself, just literally how the product's supposed to look. It's very important to us. I've said to Steve in pre-shows how what we do is less about money and all about our reputation. We wouldn't be getting asked to do these shows and give out this information to you if what we were putting across to you wasn't done in a particular way. But really, it comes down to our knowledge and our reputation. And that's the reason why we're able to do these shows for you and talk about companies like Ultima. Let's talk about the products that they've got available, Steve. I mean, they've quite a list. So I'll let you start.
All right, so we're going to kind of go in order. This is the list that Mobster put together, and I kind of I added to the list to kind of say what each thing is. So we kind of worked
Yeah.
on this list together. So the first one on the list is the Ultima Test EQ 400 mix. Now, this is a good mix. You know, for me, I'm a big fan of equipoise. I think there's a lot of benefits. So this is a good mix for someone out there who wants, depending on your dosage, okay, who wants good, clean muscle mass. If you increase the dosage, you can get more moderate muscle mass increases and bulking. This is for someone who likes to go to the gym, do high repetition, moderate training, maybe high volume training, stuff like that. It wouldn't be for someone who likes to go and do heavy, low repetition so much. It'd be, so this is a good one for that, because equipoise is really good when it comes to endurance, and it won't kind of give you these side effects that other steroids will, where it really, you know, fucks with your appetite or fucks with your cardio or something. So this is a good one for that purpose. So in this one, you know, it comes in 400 milligram milliliter. So you're getting the test and equipoise together in the same, that same CC is test and equipoise. So it's a really, really good mix for that purpose. And that's the way I would use it. You want
Yeah,
to
I
talk
mean,
about it?
to me, Steve, one of the things I just said to the listeners was how they prepared a blend in this particular case for you. So what we're looking at here, this to me is a cutting product. They've got the test in the EQ. EQ's reputation, as Steve said, for energy and enabling you to get into condition. And what would you do? It's quite a sensible dose. Might be something like 200 milligrams of each twice a week. Perfectly reasonable. That's only 800 milligrams total. And that seems to be an absolute great combination. And of course, you don't have to take a whole milligram. You could go 3/4 of a milligram and bring the overall numbers down to 600 milligrams total a week, which I think would be great for most listeners listening to this show. The next one is Ultima TNE, meaning test no ester, and it's 100 milligrams, and it's basically what we call test base. So what do I mean by that? This is two reasons I can see that listeners would like to use this one, Steve. One would be if you're tested, very quick in, very quick out, like hours. So literally beneficial in the way that if you are going to be tested within a day or two, and of course it's dependent on the quality of the test because they are getting better all the time. But if it's a low quality test, this is very quick into your system, enables you to do a certain level of performance on the day of a competition, for example, athletic or weightlifting, and in and out of your system very, very quickly. For example, also MMA and the like. Although again, like I said already, the tests are getting a lot better at catching people out. So, for example, here, Steve, I think another use for it would be pre-workout. Now, I'm not a big fan of this myself as such, but again, if this was, for example, a fighting sport, and I wanted that level of aggression in my last few uh, sparring and getting prepped for a competition and increasing my aggression with the idea of kicking ass in the ring so that on the day of the fight, I'm ready to rock and roll and absolutely smash the fuck out of my opponent, then I could see me maybe, and again, this only applies to a small percentage of listeners, using something like that. As I said, I'm not a huge fan personally of using shorter esters, testosterones to get my mind in the right place for a gym, but then I'll sit here and say that and say, but I'm quite happy to double up on more orals before I go to the gym with a relatively short half-life. So look at me contradicting myself. Move on to the next one, Steve. And this is, I'll do this one as well, which is Ultimate TNE. So that's a testosterone no ester again, Steve, but they've put it with a oxandrolone. So in a 70-30 ratio, so that would be 70 milligrams of the TNE and 30 milligrams of the anadrol, the oxandrolone. So what do you think on that one, Steve? What would users use that for, and how would they run it?
Yeah, so this is oxy. It's actually not oxandrolone, buddy. Oxandrolone will be anavar. So this is oxy, and this is anadrol, believe it or not.
Yes, sorry, yes.
Yeah. So it's a little confusing there, but I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I
Because a
said
lot of people,
anadrol in the other bit, but I got the
yeah.
oxandrolone part wrong. Yeah, you're
Yeah, so
correct.
this one will be a pre-workout. I mean, if you like to do something pre-workout to give you a little bump, and the anadrol will be in your system for about 30 or 40 hours. So it's not like going to be, the testosterone will be in your system quick, but the anadrol will stick around for longer because it does have an 8 or 9 hour half-life. The test base doesn't have any esters attached to it. It's going to be in your system within a couple hours, I would think. So, you're going to get this big boost. So you want to take this like an hour before you train. This is for people, I think, who want to have aggression when they train. So if you're a
Yes.
power lifter, this would be a good one to try. So, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things. Some people will love it, and some people will be like, it's not really worth it to me. So it just depends. Look, at the end of the day, testosterone. If you take testosterone, whether it's a long ester or if it's no ester, you want it in your system, right? So taking something that's in your system quick may not make sense to like 90% of you out there. So,
Yeah.
but it's something to try. It's something to try. It's a really interesting one.
It's one of those things sometimes, Steve, where you get like I said with me into Senamphate, I don't want the listeners to have to go through every single steroid to find the one that works for them. So when we give responses, we're generalizing for the majority of the listeners. But there are some listeners that will respond, it'll be a small percentage, to a product that makes them feel that little bit more aggressive, that little bit more assertive. I don't think that I am in that particular way. So
well,
it
this is
wouldn't
what
benefit me. But yeah.
I would rather take this than take these stimulant pre-workouts. I see
Yes. I would
people
argue
go,
the same. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
these energy drinks and these high stimulant supplements that, cause your heart rate to skyrocket and all this stuff. That shit's dangerous, man. That
Yeah.
enlarges your heart and stuff, and that fucking
Not a
gets you
fan, as you know.
addicted. It's addictive to take that shit. So if you're one of those people that take that shit because you have to take something to make you aggressive, switch to this instead, because this isn't addictive. But that shit you're taking before is addictive. So that would be a good one too, to kind of get away from your pre-workout addiction. So next one's very unique, and Mobster and I will talk about this one a little bit. This is
Yeah.
Anomass 400. It's Test E 150 milligrams, Equipoise 150 milligrams, and Tren E 100 milligrams. This is a really interesting stack. And I've used Tren, Equipoise, and Test together. And it was this one's called Anomass. So this one, the idea behind it is if you want to build muscle mass and you want to build
Yeah.
strength, this is a good one to do that and to really try this one out. So with this one, I would think if it's each cc is 400 milligrams, I'd say if you take 2 cc's a week, you're getting 300 milligrams of the test, 300 milligrams of the EQ, and 200 milligrams of Tren. That would be a good one.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Recomposition as well, Steve. I was thinking the training amphate is a longer version rather than, for example, if this was a cutting product, it'd probably be an ACE. So for me, yeah, I would run it exactly like Steve said, 2 milligrams, 2 mil, 1 mil earlier in the week, 1 mil later in the week, Steve, maybe every 4 days, something like that. Yeah, perfect for certain users. I think, as Steve said, gains for sure, strength for sure. And I think because of the trend, recomposition, so you'd probably see that combination of losing a little bit of body fat. The trend's not too high. It's the longer acting versions. You might want to try the shorter versions if you've never used trend before. And I think 2 mil once a week on Monday and say again on a Thursday, absolutely perfect. Gives you 400 milligrams both times, at 800 milligrams total. That would be great for most users. And I think you're going to get some gains here. Average user, and I'm talking about average user, anywhere between 3 to 6 pounds of muscle tissue over an 8-week cycle. You could run this a little bit longer, although you want to be careful again with the trend for that reason. So let's say 8 weeks and 1 or 2 pounds of fat loss, assuming that your diet's not on point. If your diet and cardio is on point, you might even see more fat loss than that. And again, because of the combination of the test, which is awesome, EQ for cutting, and a trend for the recomposition. I think it's kind of got everything covered almost in that particular product. So even again, it's another reason why Ultimate's put that particular one together. The next one will be incredibly popular. In fact, the next 2 will be super popular with my buddies because they've used Enamphate in the past, had great results, and it's just because my personal preference differs. So they do an Ultimate Enan 250 and an Ultimate Enan 400. So both of those are testosterone Enamphate. And it's literally just coming down to what you require for your cycle. So, for example, Steve, using the 250 product, if I've never run a cycle before, and especially if I wanted to run a form of testosterone that didn't require too many injections, Enamphate would be great. Again, I would run this twice a week. And I would probably, again, as a new user, 500 milligrams. So that would be twice a week, once monthly, one Thursday. You could run that a little bit higher, but if you're going to go higher, why don't you try the Enamphate 400? If you've used Enamphate before, you know you respond well to it. They've got you covered. They've already prepared the products, so you can run this again. 1 mil on a Monday, 1 mil on a Thursday, and you're now looking at 800 milligrams. But like I said, you've already used Innate in the past. You know you respond to it well. You've run a few cycles previously, and now you're up in the dosage a little tiny bit. What are you looking for? My buddies in the back of the day would have been using this for strength. It's absolutely great for that, and it was the base of a cycle. They quite often had other things to it. I tried this, and I believe I was running something else with it at the time, Steve, but it's that long ago. I can't remember what with. But yeah, I think this would suit a lot of listeners. If you're looking at the difference of SLMs and injection frequency and so on and so forth, Innate great because you can actually inject it less than once a week. And we know, for example, Steve, and something else, I think you could come in on this as well when we talked about TRT, because we're not actually talking about the more popular CPNA. So talk about using the Ultima Enan as a TRT derivative.
Well, what you would do is just take it once a week. So, there's, as you mentioned, as we mentioned earlier, really with testosterone in general, the way you'd want to do it, some guys like to use the testosterone solo in cycle. Some like to use it as a base in a cycle. Some like to use it as TRT. So depending on what you're looking to do, anywhere from 125 milligrams a week for TRT, up to 800 milligrams for those who really want to use a stronger dose would work depending on your particular situation. So once or twice a week would be fine. The NFA ester is a little shorter than the cypionate ester, so that's what you want to be aware of when it comes to this. So the next one we're going to talk about is the Ultima Super Test 450 blend. So this one is really interesting because the milligrams are very funky, but it's test acetate 32
Yes.
milligrams, which is not seen very often.
No.
Testosterone decanoate, which is 147 milligrams. Propionate 73 milligrams, cypionate 125, and phenylpropionate 73. So it's kind of like Sustanon,
But
they
it isn't. I know it's kind of weird, Steve, in that particular way. It's slightly different because they actually
slightly
have the
different, and they
sus type
add
products.
instead of four esters, they have 5.
Yes.
So really with this one, it's 450. So you would do this 1 cc a week if you wanted to use it as part of a like cycle. If you want to cycle with it, you could do 1 cc a week or even half cc a week. Now, if you want to use this for TRT purposes, you could get away with injecting it once every, I don't know, 2 weeks. Then
Yeah.
you'd be getting, it'd be like a more of a sports TRT, because if you did it once every 2 weeks, you get 225 per
Yeah.
week. And it does have that decanate ester in it, so that stretches it out longer. So this is, I think most people would use this more as a base of a cycle and just do it once a week, because you're getting 450.
I think it's just a great alternative to the Sustanon, and they do have a product called Ultima Sus 500, which is of course exactly mimicking a Sustanon product, but with a slightly higher amount per milligram. Sorry, per milliliter.
So it's they'll double up everything. So they got the decanate, isocapriate, phenylpropionate, and propionate, but they double up what would be in the 250. So this is their own version of it. So this is for people who want to use a longer cycle, and then they would use a Sustanon, inject it. If you wanted to do 500 once a week, that would be for a cycle. But and then if you wanted to do it every 2 weeks, you could do it that way, whatever you want to do it. Usually the way Sustanon was originally designed for TRT purposes was you take a large amount infrequently.
Yes.
That's how you would use it. That's how it was originally designed to be used. So it just depends.
And then the thing Steve and I have actually discussed is you said you could still do it that way and still see a lot of the benefits, but for whatever reason, for performance enhancement purposes, for muscle gaining and bodybuilding rather than TRT, myself and most users would typically run Sustanon along with, say, for example, Deca that I mentioned earlier on, at twice a week for the same reasons that we discussed with some of the other products. But again, why 500 milligrams per milliliter instead of 250, which would be more common? Literally, again, because you've got less frequent pinning, if that's the way you want to run it, and it's a higher amount, so it's even less to inject, which seems to suit more people. And as I discussed at the beginning of the show, you didn't used to see this earlier on. We started to see high dose per milligram per milliliter products come out, and initially there was a lot of problems with it, but because companies like Ultimate have sort of reduced those problems, post-injection pain and the like, you are starting to see products like this. It means you don't have to inject 1 mil or half a mil, for example, Steve, as opposed to 2 mil. and still get the same great results that you would expect. As an example, and I discussed it on the previous show, I said there'll be nothing to stop me in the future running a product exactly like this and applying my sus deca combination. So, for example, 400 milligrams of deca with 500 milligrams of Ultima sus 500, and I could do that literally with 2 injections, or even better, Steve, 2 mil total per week, 1 mil of each. And that suits me down to the ground. Never been a huge fan of pinning just for the sake of it. Don't want to be pinning multiple times per week, never mind multiple times per day. So products like these produced by Ultima suit me incredibly well. Referring, as I did earlier on, to the Ultima TNE, we've got Ultima Suspension 100. And why 100 milligrams per milliliter? Again, very quick in, very quick out, Steve. What would you see most users using a product Ultima Suspension
Yeah,
for?
and we talked about the the testosterone no ester earlier, so it's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. So if you're a tested athlete, or if you just want something pre-workout, that's how you use it. So I'd group it with that. So that's
The only
how.
other thing I can think of, Steve, is literally, and I mentioned this before when I was talking about competing bodybuilders, the reason why you sometimes see bodybuilders not using shorter acting esters for pre-workout, but literally because they're trying to manipulate their variables that close to competition and seeing how their body responds to certain things, certain lifestyle stuff, training and so on and so forth. And because they want to peak for a certain day of competition, so you're more likely to see in that situation shorter rest is used towards the end of a competition stack. And again, there are sometimes issues with a bit of pain in some of the shorter esters. So, for example, if you had a high ratio of milligrams per milliliter, it might be a bit more uncomfortable. And again, it's literally going to come down to what that person requires. You're not going to be doing 500 milligrams of a real short ester a few days out from a competition for bodybuilding. If anything, you'll be taking some of the steroids out of your system, or you want them out of your system to reduce inflammation so that you hold less water, so you look more amazing on stage. What about the next two, Steve? I mean, they're very, very similar. Ultima Tri-Test 350 blend and Ultima Tri-Test 400 blend.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here, guys? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I looked up what they contain. So the 350 comes in Test E, Test SIP, and Test Prop. So it's got that's a really interesting blend. And the Tri-Test 400 blend is a little bit different. It also has a Test SIP, but it has a longer ester, the Test Decanate, and then it has the Testosterone E as well. So the only difference between the two is that the 350 comes with propionate and the 400 comes in decanate. So if you wanted to take something that had a more longer ester, you go with the 400 option. So that'd be a good option, similar to sustanon, something you would take. You would take it basically less often. So if you wanted to do once a week or once every 2 weeks, you could go that route. And then with the 350, you want to take it like once a week, or even, yeah, I say once a week, or even once every 10 days would work good into the 350. So look, they have so many different options, whatever you're looking for. Like it's fascinating how these different blends they came together. And what's amazing is these sell. Like people like specific things. They like to try different
Yes.
things. They like to try different esters. So that's good that they give you different options.
Let me talk about most users, Steve, right? There's a sort of machismo sometimes when we're on the forums, when we're discussing steroid use, whether it's on Reddit or Twitter, on any kind of social media. There's almost a slightly tongue-in-cheek approach to using steroids. And I think sometimes, even I might have been guilty of this once or twice in the past, although, please God, I wasn't that bad. So, for example, we get off on the whole, yeah, I don't mind sticking steroids in. It's all fucking good. I like to take steroids every day, blah, blah, blah. But the reality of the situation is most people are not comfortable injecting as such. Sometimes a lot easier to get a buddy or a partner or girlfriend or something like that to do it for you than it does itself. I've got to become more comfortable. So if I can take a product that requires me to inject less often in terms of actual frequency, that's good. If I can take a product that requires that when I do inject it, gives me less pain, even if it's only for a few minutes after I'm injecting it, that's got to be good. If I can take a product where I'm literally, for example, getting ready for a competition as a bodybuilder, and I might require multiple pins, now we're looking at a sheer volume of product going in. Most users, myself included, I'm going to throw Steve in here as well, 2-3 mils comfortable. 4 mil can be uncomfortable. especially if it's one site. If it's not in one site, it means I've got to do 2 mil here, 2 mil there. So anytime a company's prepared a product, as I said earlier, and where they are literally thinking about how the user is going to use it, how often that user is going to be comfortable with injecting. We've even discussed, Steve, for example, having to sit down with the partner or girlfriend, etc., and say, oh, we're going to be using a steroid cycle and talk about health and safety and the frequency of pinning. And if they can become on side, great. Then you've got someone that might actually help you with it and so on and so forth. But if they're not, they don't want you sitting there in front of the kids injecting steroids. So you might have to go off to the bedroom or the garage, the bathroom, the gym. God, if some guys even in the car going to the gym. So you need to be in a situation where companies think about how products are going to be used. They know the kind of cycles that most of us do, the very, very popular definitions of cycles out there, and they produce all these different products with the different blends. And like I said earlier on, they're also making it more comfortable, easier for you to have high volume, for example, the 400s and the 500 per milligram per milliliter products, way more comfortable to be injected. What does all that stuff mean? It means, for example, that if we want to, we can inject 1 to 2 mil of a high volume product, be getting very, very close to a gram once a fucking week, or even as Steve says, once every 10 days. If we are, as we were talking about in the pre-show, Steve, and we discussed in the podcast, doing TRT, then we have options that allow us to do 1 10 days, 1 14 days, 1 every 21 days, if we want to go with TRT, or to do half a mil once a week for 200 milligrams, for example, using the 400 milligram in infant product, if we so wish. So companies like Ultima are literally producing product that's exactly how you're going to use it. They say, why was, when we produce single source testosterones and single source of other products, what was the cycles that those users were putting together? Why don't we produce a product that has that stack, that cycle in a product? How often is that the users going to be pinning? Do they want to be pinning 3 times a week or 4 times a week if they're not competing as a top professional bodybuilder? No. They've got to go to work. They've got to work in an office. They've got to take the kids to school. They can't be injecting at the office. They can only inject in this situation. When do most people train? What are the gains that most people want from their lifting, from what the reasons why they go to the gym, the reasons why they're keeping their diets clean, the reasons why they're running logs? And that's the reasons why these products are put together the way that they are to suit users. The last one, Steve, is just the ultimate prop, which is Test Propionate 100. As I said earlier on, quicker for the same reasons as Steve said earlier on with the TNE. What about the whole brand thing here, Steve? I want to touch on this again, right? And expand on the stuff that we talked about earlier on. So and we've done Ultima shows already, and you go away and you look at what Ultima is. You go away and look at the companies that are selling their products. Why are they sold by those companies? Well, they're sold by those companies because they know, the companies that are reselling the brand, that this is a product that we can work with. How many times have we had any issues? Might be a handful of times, and Ultima has dealt with those issues straight away. Has there been any particular customer complaints about the product? Can we, as a brand reseller, or us as an end user, find companies, look at lab tests, look at users of the product? For example, let's say that we didn't know anything about Ultima. We come onto the forums. I want to find out if anybody else has been using Ultima. I put Ultima into the search option and literally come up with 20, 30 pages of people that have been using their product. What did those users say? I can literally see someone that's run an 8-week or 12-week cycle, before and after results. Now, oh, that guy looks exactly like me. He's got my kind of build. Look how his physique was at the beginning. That's not too dissimilar to mine right now. Look at his results at the end. So if I train like him, if I eat like him, and if I use Ultimate product, those are the kind of results that I can expect. It's going to come down to my effort. I've got to do some work at the dining table. I've got to do some work in the gym. But I know that if I do work hard at the dining table, I do work hard in the gym, my results are going to look like that. What about those lab tests I mentioned? We know, for example, Steve and I have mentioned this before, that we go first with the lab tests that the company's produced in-house. Secondly, where the company has taken random samples, even sometimes on their own lab test, and sent them off to an independent lab for testing. And finally, where end users like ourselves have used product, and we've also brought product and we sent those products out of our own expense, and we know that users have done this and sent them off. How common is that? It used to be that only groups of users would put money together and get these products tested. I've actually been involved in it myself way back in the day, Steve. Now it's more common because it's come down on a milligram per milliliter basis. It's actually cheaper than it used to be. People can afford, with the disposable income, to have these products tested by labs for themselves. No bias, literally my money, I'll send the product off. The product comes back, it's tested, here are the results. It's not biased, it's not someone that's getting paid, it's not a shield, it's me with my money doing it. And that's what we've seen end users doing. And then, like I said, silly things like how the product looks, how long the company's been around, what other products do they sell? This is a product I'm thinking about, but let's look at some of the other products. Is the label readable? Does it look like a pharmaceutical product? Does this brand sell all over the world? What about stuff like that, Steve? Why do we think Ultima comes across that way and gives what we, in our opinion, is a good quality testosterone product?
Look, it's a psychological thing, and my trust, over time, my experiences dealing with certain people, and I have the belief and that 90 to 95% of people out there are good people, but there is that 5% or 2% or 3%, whatever the percentage would be, the small percentage that are not good people. And they're going to knowingly sell you gear that they know is no good. So for me, a psychological standpoint, I never want to be put in a situation where I'm on cycle like I have before, and I'm using gear that I find out is no good because I get blood work done, as I said earlier in the podcast. So when I use Ultima, it's a psychological thing. I know this gear is good. I know if something on cycle is not going my way. Maybe I'm not building the muscle the way I wanted. Maybe I'm not burning the fat the way I want. Maybe I'm not putting on the strength I want. I know that it's something to do with me. Maybe my body's going through, some its own thing where it's kind of reshuffling. Maybe my diet's not as good as it should be. Maybe my training's not good as it should be. So I know it's on me. I can't blame the gear. So that's a nice thing to have psychologically. I like that. I like to be in control of what I'm doing. I know that I could switch my workouts up. I can switch my diet up because I know the gear is not the problem. I know that I'm the problem. So that's very important from a psychological standpoint to be able to trust the gear that you're on, not just trust what you're taking is what is on the label, but also in this case with testosterone, I know that the testosterone, if I'm injecting 200 milligrams a week of testosterone, I'm going to get 200 milligrams a week of testosterone, not 100 milligrams and not 300 milligrams, but exactly what I put in my body. That's important. We've seen underground labs overdose their testosterone, which might seem like a good idea, but it's not, because now you're running into side effects that you weren't expecting. You might take 150 milligrams a week of testosterone and get gyno because it's double dosed. So instead of taking 150, you're really taking 300. And now you deal with estrogen problems because the source was giving you double what you expected. So it's not just underdosing, but it's overdosing. And it's the stuff we talked about earlier, the metals in our products, the oils, the bad oils, the allergens, all this other stuff that can affect your gains. If you're taking something that's giving you post-injection pain or giving you allergies, that's going to affect your immune system. That's going to affect your recovery. That's going to affect your sleep. That's going to affect your workouts. You see, it's a domino effect. So you're going to get less gains over the long term. So we want to make sure we're using high quality gear. So Ultima, they have been tested. They have been reviewed by some of the top guys out there. Professional bodybuilders trust Ultima. So that's all you need to know right there. If professional bodybuilders are going to trust them, they're spending all this money and investing their time, and they have to win. If they want to get sponsorships, they got to win. So they want to use the best gear possible, and they're choosing to use Ultima. So, Mobster, a minute left. Finish up with your final thoughts and take us a disclaimer.
Yeah, guys, give Ultima products a look. Check out their testosterone options. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Come onto the forums. Let us know if you tried Ultima, what results you've got. Check out the logs, like I said earlier on. See the comments and reviews that people have given to Ultima products, especially the testosterone derivatives that we discussed today. And we're obviously going to be interested in your thoughts. Please note, we are not doctors and opinions are ours. It is our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment apply.